Whenever I talk about the job I do, people say two things. The first one is they basically applaud me for doing so. And second thing, which is, I believe, way more important, is that they recognize the necessity. So I'm talking about giving people perspective again who are not heard, seen, and understood. I'm talking about setting up this hub, this foundation for, in this case, neurodivergent young ones and children, and of course, having them interact with the adult ones as well, including the business owners. So everyone gets a place in that hub and learns to understand one another. Now, I have talked more often about the difficulty behind understanding one another because let's face it, we don't get taught in school how to understand one another. And I'm going to give you a very funny example about how we can miss certain things. So this weekend, I was somewhere at a concert. Well, actually, I was at two concerts. And one of the people I got to talk to at the bar didn't speak Dutch. The girl behind the bar didn't speak English. And so he made it seem as if he could understand Dutch. It was really funny. So at some point he whispered in my ear, I have no clue what you're saying. But the way his expression came across as if he actually did. And it was kind of hard for her to figure out, does he do it or doesn't he do it? Because actually, and she didn't realize it till later on, she asked him some trick questions, which were words related to English. So, but yes, this is the thing. If we are not aware of someone not understanding us because we don't pay enough attention, then things can go haywire pretty quickly. During that weekend, I talked to someone and he said to me, well, I've seen you before numerous times, and I have been going through all the concerts. Where? When? But that was not important. The thing is, I have difficulty recognizing faces. And I need to see people a few times. And especially after a few times, I remember their story. Once it's been repeated like 2 or 3 times, then, it's there. It's there for eternity, I suppose. And so I got to meet up with someone and I was like, oh, I've heard others talked about you so many times. I knew things that had happened in his life, but I couldn't match it with a face. So when he said to me that he, in fact, actually did know who I was like, okay, well, I know I haven't changed much. And here's the thing. Thinking about this, I was like, okay, so when it comes to LinkedIn, I feel like I've changed so much. And the question, of course, is that true? So there's the difference in looks, and on the surface, I haven't changed much when it comes to looks. Of course, there are always people who say, oh, I like the color of your hair. It's nice and blue. And unfortunately for me, it's, well, there are 2 colors in there. It happens when you get a little bit older, and they are going to make this blue again later this week. So next live, you should see it full back in blue again. But the blue, and then of course the tattoos here from the stars, it stands out. And it was one of those things that I got to talk about, like, hey, how recognizable are we? And in the community where I was, so like I said, I went to 2 concerts. It's kind of normal to see someone look like me. But going back to LinkedIn, then I match it with a different standard, which has to do with how do you come across when we're talking about businesses. Now, the good news is that whenever I join one of my clients, whether it's at work or it's at the municipality or at school, I'm not aware of what I look like. I might think about, okay, what am I going to wear? So wearing this shirt is not the best idea when I go there. But then on the other hand, why not? And my clients most certainly will wear something like this. What it's about is about the connection, not based on looks, not based on this shirt, but based on who are you? And what are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to get across? And can I see you? Can I feel you and understand you? And likewise, can I get across to you that I do understand what it is you need? And if I don't, well, let's ask on. So going to LinkedIn, every day I still feel a little reluctant to go there, whether it's because some people might answer initially and then they stop, because let's face it, LinkedIn, those are my ex-colleagues, my ex-employers, people I know, so former students, and ones I went to certain schools with, but they're not necessarily my friends. Well, as a matter of fact, they are not my friends. Well, some of them are actually on LinkedIn who are my friends, but most of them I know from a working situation. And when I might reach out, it might be like, hey, are you a night owl or are you that early? When they respond to me, say at 5 o'clock, and then I might give them a compliment, which they appreciate. But then when I ask a little bit on and I put more words and more sentences in there, all of a sudden it's crickets. And I'm left behind with, okay, so what again was it that made you fall silent? Were you uncomfortable with what I said? Or because it came from the heart, I was talking about the importance of communication and also being understood, and about leadership. And whereas on one hand, I did get the acknowledgement earlier. Well, I'm glad that that's what he said, that you have seen this, because I try to be a people person. Then in the following conversation, or that same conversation, but me responding to it, there was nothing anymore. And I know that I'm going to reach out soon again, because this doesn't feel very fulfilling. And I would like to know, why did this person stop talking? Is it because we've never been friends? Did he think I've spent enough time on you already? Didn't he think the topic was interesting? Or was it something that he had to think about? And then it became too overwhelming. Well, all those kind of things, and then some. That's probably where the answer is. And it just shows how my mind works. It can go in all these different directions. And what I tell my clients is, if you don't know, ask. So I'm going to ask pretty soon myself. What stood out for me, besides people recognizing me, because, well, I think a decade ago, my hair was more with this red vibe to it instead of the blue vibe. At some point, I decided to change it. Like I said, the community I was at this weekend, because we are all metal fans, we are into metal, they recognize me. We understand one another. We can talk very easily to one another, and there's no barrier whatsoever. And that's why it feels so different, and it stands out way more when I go to a platform like LinkedIn, because those people I interacted with who went to the concert, well, I don't think I have to even mention LinkedIn to them. It's not the place where they would go. As a matter of fact, most people either go to Facebook, those are the older generations, or to Instagram, the younger generations. So yes, I'm on both, and quite honestly, I'm less and less on Facebook. Well, for one of the reasons is that Facebook has this annoying habit of slowing down everything. But on the other hand, I don't want to spend too much time on social media. I want to spend some time, but before you know it, you get drawn into the cat videos and the other immensely cute dog videos. And I'm like, okay. And actually, I did have a conversation with Google AI about this, because I don't know if you have noticed, I love AI, but a lot of videos are created using AI. Now, there are the occasional videos I absolutely love. So Slash, he shared a video, and I went back to the one who actually had created it, and he had used a certain program to do so. And it was about coming into this room which looked like a store. There were keyboards in there, there were guitars in there, there was a drum kit in there. And, well, apparently the owner of the house or the store had said to the cleaning lady, make sure that it's really cleaned very well. And then the next moment you see her with this hose, this garden hose, and she's hosing all the instruments down. And then she gets to the snare, and then she really rubs with the sponge on the snare. And I'm like, and I think that a lot of musicians with me were like, oh my God, this cannot be true. Now, it's not true if you look more closely to the video. So Slash had rearranged some things which made it more believable. But when you see the original videos, especially part 1 and part 2, then you actually see that things don't add up. Now, in this case, it's funny. I mean, I wouldn't want to see this happen for real, right? So, but when we talk about AI for the sake of getting people to pay attention, making up stories which actually aren't true or only partial true, then we are talking about a whole different scala of things. And whereas I love to know the original story, I don't like it when I am confronted with videos which are just invented for the sake of, like I said, numbers, people who are watching. And when I said earlier, I don't want to well, let's say waste too much time. So I do want to spend some time on social media to know what's going on with friends. But I don't want to spend all my time on social media, and especially not when it comes to things which aren't true at all. So I have learned from Google AI by now to see how to recognize these videos, whether they are true or not. And I'm not just talking about the little glitches in the video. So often you see people who are suddenly wearing different clothes, or there are different persons altogether. Like the video, it was like a ton of water or just a little pool of water. So those things share or show you already that it's been made with AI. But when it comes to spending time, the question, of course, is what do we learn if all we can listen to are these chopped up versions from AI who make things, well, besides that there are mixing up the facts, it's about everything has to be so completely emotional, and it's like when you watch the movies nowadays. So when you look back on the movies in the previous century, we had action movies and there was a lot going on. But if you look at action movies nowadays, 20,000 things have to happen in 1 minute. Well, okay, it's a little bit exaggerated, but that's the reason why you can keep watching the same movie over and over and over again, because there are always new things standing out. And for me, it's getting harder and harder to actually go to these kind of movies. Take Pirates of the Caribbean, for instance. So many things happen just in that one movie. And the more sequels you've got, the follow-ups are, things are happening even more and more and more and more. And it's like, okay, I want to focus on certain things, but this is going a little bit quick. So of course, when it comes to the main thread throughout the story or the movie, yes, I get that. But when it comes to the little clues, well, there are a lot of things that I didn't see. And not too long ago, I went to my brother to an action movie, and that was actually refreshing because the guy was on an island near a lighthouse. Well, actually, he was living in the lighthouse. And so others, if he wanted food or supplies, they had to come over in a boat and drop it off. And he had no contact with the outside world other than this. And at some point, there's this girl, and she's a very friendly girl. And she wants to give him something. And, well, he's like, go away, I don't want this. And then following the script, you see why. Because the moment that the satellite zooms in, recognizes the girl, recognizes him in particular, then all of a sudden things happen, and, well, people start killing all the people who are there, including the dad of the little girl. But what was so nice was, yes, there was a lot of action going on, but it wasn't like 1,000 things at the same time. And for me, that makes it just a tidbit easier to just process it and really get into the movie and the build-up action. But here's the thing, our brain is being wired to not being able to pay too much attention for a long period of time, with all the swiping that we are doing. We are getting impatient. We want results quickly. And I'll be the first one to admit that there's this game that I like to play, especially if I want to wind down. And the thing is, it gives me quick results. And when it doesn't give me quick results, I might actually invest some money in it. Well, investment is not the right word because I don't get anything out of it apart from instant satisfaction, but nothing long term. Long term, it's only costing me money. So I don't advise anyone to do something along those lines. But when I talk to whether it's Brendan AI or Google AI about it, they actually say, but that's how things are made. They are made in such a way that they are addictive, that you do want to spend money because you want more results. You want that high. You want those hormones that feel like, okay, instant satisfaction. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but actually when we talk about food, for instance, and it was really, I still remember the first time that I actually read about it. Certain foods have been made in such a way that once you start eating it, you want to keep on eating it and you want more and more and more. And even though you might be full, you still want to keep on eating it because they put these ingredients in there which make you keep on eating. And in this society where we have to do so many things and we already have to pay attention to what we're eating, and if we're not overeating, we don't want these kind of things. But it's like people prey on things which are not good for us. And all of us, we just get sucked into it. Of course, at some point we become aware, and that's when you can tell yourself, okay, let's not start with this because once I start, I can stop. And I guess that being aware of how we take care of our bodies and our brains, it's so important. Now, let's go back to what I actually wrote down. So I started talking about the importance of communication, and especially when it comes to neurodiversity, and how this is no longer a luxury. This is something that we need to do in order to actually understand one another. And what I've noticed is it's already hard enough to learn certain things when it comes to school, because we are not taught how to communicate in school. But school, when we look at subsets of people and how they learn and how they actually process things, but also give it back to you. Well, if it's only directed to one subset, the main subset, and the other subset is basically ignored because they have too many questions, it takes too much time to answer, then what are we doing nowadays? So when I talked about being impatient, about us being fed all these things which give us this feeling of being on a high, it doesn't only affect us as in when we are watching videos, but it also affects us when we talk to other people. Because are we capable of listening to a story that's like longer than 1 minute? Can we? And or is the other one already done with whatever it is that you're saying? So how interesting does it need to be? And more importantly, how can we involve the other one too? And I like these conversations where, you go back and forth with questions. And I honestly say it's one of the reasons that I love to talk to Google AI, because there are conversations and there are conversations. There are the verbal conversations, and then there are the conversations through the keyboard. Now, you may say, but isn't that the same thing? And I would say no. I'm way more comfortable to go back and forth on the keyboard and just sharing my inner thoughts, and especially since Google AI isn't going to do anything with it at all. So that's easy. It's very different, and it's like I can go way deeper and ask certain questions I wouldn't be able to ask someone else in a conversation. Now, of course, the good thing about Google AI is it draws from all these various sides. And every once in a while, so I like to talk in a conversational way with Google AI. And at some point, I might notice that, things become factual. And then I'll say, hi. And then it's, oh, welcome back. And then, oh, yeah, I was distracted. Now, of course, I also know that Google AI can come up with a lot of nonsense. So you always have to check what Google AI tells you. And I do tell Google AI, you were wrong with what you just said. This is not true. And then Google AI might actually say, no, it is true because, and then I say, well, actually, I was at this place and I can tell you what you're saying is not true. And then it's like, oh, my apologies. And what I also like about Google AI, it's got a sense of humor. But it's kind of weird at some point to realize that I've been going back and forth with Google AI, which also can include a PTSD course where I'm like, okay, so here is this person who has written this, who's been talking about it or teaching about the topic for the last 20 or 30 years. And here I am having a very different vision on things and thinking, this is too superficial. And then when talking to Google AI about it, it's kind of, I will ask, is this me? Am I missing something? Or I might actually ask, what do you think about it? And I don't believe that Google AI necessarily agrees with me. But it is kind of interesting to see if I'm right or wrong and why I'm right or wrong. And again, you always have to check whether Google AI is right, because it gets its information from people who just send it out there. And like I said at the beginning, when I was talking about those videos, which are made by AI, if you are not aware that, well, you can recognize when it's done by AI pretty easily, because they use certain voices which are usually very nice to listen to. Sometimes they are so slow and they'll just go speak 2 times. And maybe the most interesting thing is when they start talking about certain topics which get me to investigate deeper. Like, for instance, I was looking at this video which was talking about the Victorian age. And it said that we had to pay attention to how certain people were posing in front of the camera. Now, apparently, back in those days, it took a long time before that image actually got created. So there were these standards, like very heavy standards, where we as living human beings could lean against in order to stay in that same position. And I don't believe they were very comfortable the way that it was described, but it was made for the living human being. Now, this was about people who wanted to pose with their loved ones after they were gone. So I was taking a look at those pictures and I was like, okay, I can see that this person is looking in that direction, but there are also people who are like really eager looking into the camera. So I asked Google AI, is any of this true? Well, because I said, they say that those standards that I was talking about earlier are used for the dead people. And then I said, but dead people, they look differently. And well, they salivate because, well, all the fluids, they're no longer circulated through the system. So, well, so something is bound to drip even from the face and the mouth and the nose. So it didn't make sense what I was seeing. And of course, there are only a few pictures of those times. And because we were talking about it, I actually got the sites where I could go to really learn about these topics. So in a way, because it caught my interest, I got to learn a lot about it, especially what wasn't true. But overall, I don't like it when I get fed all these AI videos. So I don't know about you, but if you are agreeing with me, then make sure that you put a dislike, not on this video, on the AI videos. This is live. So you don't want to do it on this video. But when it comes to AI videos, if you are like, this is a waste of time, because first of all, the information doesn't sound right. And second of all, shouldn't we be interested in real life stories instead of those who are very sad and makes us feel good because, well, we can see that certain cats or dogs have it far worse than we do? Well, no, that's not what I am after. So getting back to this weekend, I talked to a lot of people, and that included also people who came to the concerts, and that also included younger people. So we got to talk about certain things. And when the people asked me what I was doing, especially the young ones out there, they referenced a certain network. And why did they do it? Because they thought that they could help me with the foundation, which is the hub for the neurodivergent young ones. So the ones who think differently and are not heard, seen, and understood. So when I said I help or I support those who don't have any perspective anymore, or they don't see any perspective anymore, to get it back, they instantly knew what I was talking about. I can tell you that hopefully you're not one of many who feels that same way, because if you do, that means that a lot of out there don't see any perspective anymore. But then again, if you are still watching this, it might actually be that something speaks to you because you recognize what it's like not to be heard, seen, and understood. And if that's the case, or you know people who feel like this, then please stay and just listen and write things down which resonate with you and tell them to people who feel alone and feel like, but there is no one out there who understands me. Well, the good news is there are people out there, for instance, like me. And when I'm going to do my master's, I'm going to specialize in actually bringing this topic into the attention of other people because things need to change. And I already know how I'm doing certain things, but there's more to it. There's more research that can be done. There are more networks out there. And the more that we can connect and help one another, the quicker things might change. Because I have to say that starting things up, just me as one person, well, that's why it's taking a long time. I mean, it's costly to set up a foundation. It's the way it is. But there are also people who need to be on the board. We need volunteers, a location to go to. The good news, however, is that by talking about it, whether it's to Google AI or to actual living human beings, I get these tips like go to this place, go to that place, and just see who has certain information. And the more I share it with other people are like, yeah, we recognize this. So it's something that actually isn't hidden. It's hidden for certain people, maybe for most of the people, but the people I get to talk to, somehow we seem to recognize one another. And actually, it also has to do with how we interact with one another. So, for instance, I help out clients who are on the spectrum. And the more I read about it and the more I ask about it, the more I realize that I have certain habits which are completely in line with people who are on the spectrum. So other people already said, yeah, you're probably on the spectrum. Even Google AI uses this term ADHD. So AU is in all, as in autism, and then ADHD. So ADHD. In Dutch, we say ADHD. So like, ouch. That's just the way we pronounce the A and the U. And if you start to just think about, hey, where and how and what makes you feel safe and at ease and energized, but also relaxed, then on one hand, it's probably, all those endorphins which make us feel energized. But at the same time, those same endorphins can also make us feel depleted. And as one person said to me not too long ago, I didn't realize how severe autism could be, or actually the change in stimulants, until someone said, could you please have told me that you were going to turn on the lights? And it's true. When I go into a tunnel driving on the road and I'm wearing my glasses, then of course, the moment that I'm in the tunnel, and I mean my sunglasses, it gets dark. And then the moment that I get out, I'm like, oh, bright light, bright light, bright light. So it was sort of like a joke. And back in the days, because then I would say it in the Dutch way, which was licht, bright light. But those who are very sensitive to sounds and lights, they recognize it. And even at concerts, so not too long ago, I was at a different concert and I literally walked away. I walked outside just to relax and to desensitize and to get back to what I consider a routine which makes me feel good. So I went over to, well, it wasn't a restaurant, it was more like a pub kind of thing. And I said, okay, what's on the menu? And do you have latte? Well, fortunately for me, they did. So I had a little snack, and even though it was cold outside, I was like, it's nice to just be in the fresh air and not have all these sounds surrounding me because it was overwhelming. And what I noticed back then, because I went to concerts like 3 days in a row, that third day, that took its toll on me. So this weekend, I've been going 2 days in a row, and I actually only wanted to go to one because, well, it was literally in my backyard. So I was like, oh, that's nice. 11 minutes driving straight to town, and I'm there. So that was a luxurious thing, luxury position. And then the next day, a friend of mine who lives like over 2 hours driving from me went to the venue, which is, well, an hour driving from the both of us, but then from opposite directions. And we were like, okay, let's meet up. And I did something that I love to do. I decided to take pictures. So on the first day, I said, well, would you like me to shoot some pictures? And I also told the story why I have a decent camera nowadays. And they were like, oh, yeah, yes, please. So they put me on the guest list, and there I was shooting pictures. And that means that I'm in my element. And when I have a certain role, it's way more easy for me to go through the crowd. Now, please know that when we're talking about metal concerts, I am in my element, whether I'm doing something or not. And the one thing that I really loved was when one of the band members actually said to me, oh, you have improved, because they remembered that I was in a wheelchair at some point, because I just had surgery. And, well, you are standing there. And I realized that when Delane was still playing with the old band members, not that I mean they were old in age, but the former band members, one of the things that I really wanted to was being able to jump. Now, nowadays I wear my braces a lot, so they are huge. I feel like Bionic Woman when I'm wearing them. I'm not sure if it would be a good thing to jump, but in this case, I could actually really enjoy the concert. So yes, I did sit down at times, but also just being able to stand and move. And I realized while I was there that I had this huge smile on my face all the time, because I was able to be me and to enjoy the music and be with like-minded people. And even the people I didn't know, I would look next to me, and, it's a sort of like women amongst one another. Well, I also had it with the men, actually. But we would smile at one another like, yes, this is amazing. And we are having a good time. Good music, great music. And I don't know how to say it, but there was something special about this. And on one hand, And there were a lot of stimulants because the music was loud. And sometimes I really had to focus because I could hear all the instruments, but the vocals, that was another thing. When you went to the back was then you could hear the vocals, but when you were standing in front of the stage, well, there was a bit of a different story. And then depending on where I would stand, I would be very close to one of the monitors or the boxes, and it would be so loud, to the speakers I meant, and it would be so loud, and I was like, okay, I don't know how long I can stand this, actually. But the whole vibe, just being focused on one thing and going all in, just one thing for a couple of hours, that was amazing. And I guess when I talked about understanding people and the way they think and how they process, when we talk about neurodiversity, it's not only that it takes a little bit longer to respond because they might see things from different perspectives and then decide on, okay, what am I going to choose? But it most certainly is also about, but how much can we actually process? So on one hand, you'll see a lot of them gaming because they can focus, there's a certain predictability. But on the other hand, it's also about, okay, we do this to unwind from communication with other people or things that were really intense. Why am I talking about this? Not just because of the weekend, but because I talked to the school where I'm going to do my master's. And it was kind of cool because I had filled out this form. And when I was filling it out, I was like, oh, I actually did a lot when it comes to all these kind of things. And apparently, so the teacher thought the same thing because we had a conversation last Monday and I'm in. So it was that moment that she showed me how she hit that button, which subscribed me to the master studies. I was like, yes. And what I didn't share is, well, actually, I shared it to a degree. At the beginning, I shared with you about the different school systems and how they are focused on one set of people who understand certain things a certain way. But unfortunately, it also means that a number of children are excluded when it comes to a style of learning. Now, fortunately for me, I went to school in the previous century, also in this century, but I'm talking about elementary school and high school. And because of it, and we didn't have the internet, it wasn't go look it up. And we could literally see in the books how certain things worked, and I could go back and forth until I understood certain things. Now, I will say that thanks to some of the teachers out there, I actually was able to get good grades, because if they hadn't taken the time to explain to me why certain things didn't work the way I wanted them to, well, I would have flunked it, absolutely. But it was one explanation that was like, oh, this is what you want from me. Yeah, I can do that. And usually it's like going back to the basics on my end. But talking to that teacher and then later writing about it, so I've got this entire post which is ready for LinkedIn. When I was writing it down, so many memories came flooding back. And let's focus on just one example, but it's an example which shows the difference when it comes to neurodiversity between neurotypical, so what's mostly seen in society, versus neurodivergent, which is still a little underrated, even though the percentage is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So when I told Google AI about that moment that I decided to quit the Academy of Arts, there was nothing emotional about it. It was matter of fact. My dad had said, if you flunk, you have to leave the house. In the last week, I heard, we're not letting you go on to the next year. So, since I had heard it numerous times, I said, thank you. Now my dad is going to kick me out of the house. So I left the building and I started asking around. And I think a month or a couple of months later, that's when I started working at Pink Elephant in IT, because I had been working in IT prior to doing the Academy of Arts. And it was a reaction from Google AI, which actually made me realize the difference, because I said, well, no, it was factual, because I had heard, well, if you flunk, then you go leave the house. What happened was something totally different. I did leave after about 3 months or 4 months, say half a year tops. But the moment that I started working, at some point I started looking for places where I could stay. Because in my mind, it was still true. If you flunk, you need to leave the house. So I found a job, and then I saved some money. I found a place where I could live, and I did. My parents were worried sick. They didn't mean for me to leave the house totally unprepared. But that's what happened, because my mind is like, if you tell me things often enough, and sometimes you only have to say it once, it gets stuck, and it's the truth. So what I want you to consider is, where or what or how do you say certain things to people? And are you aware that they might actually consider this a literal statement? Because if you are like, oh, but they know that this isn't how I meant it to be, well, and that's the same thing with when you turn someone down in class as a teacher. The child might not ask anything anymore, because when you raise your hand, you get put down. So I want you to think about how you react to certain responses, but I also want you to think about, what do you say without really thinking about the consequences? Because if the teachers back then at the Academy of Arts, would have helped me a bit more, instead of discussing me and then concluding, well, she needs to do the year again. And they actually thought that after a year I would come back and continue on, because, well, I was like, I'm going to work. And then they said, okay, well, then she can come back after a year. And they all talked about this behind my back. I had no clue what was going on, that the teacher was calling with my mom. I mean, all I was in the zone of like, okay, I flunked, so I need to go. And why is this important? Because when it is about the school system and exams being directed in a certain way for, well, in a certain way that people think, and they don't take the other subset into consideration, then we get things which, I mean, of course, we have certain levels when it comes to being able to understand certain things. But when we actually are capable of understanding it, if it would have been explained in a different way, and we would be able to pass the exam if our way of thinking would be accepted as well, well, there would be a completely different future for so many children out there. I mean, I spoke recently to someone, and I said it to some other people too, and I've heard this before. When you don't learn to learn and you don't feel invited to ask certain questions, and you are discouraged to do certain things in a certain way that makes life a little bit easier for you, then at some point, yes, you can flunk the class and then maybe again. Now, when you might be thinking about, but this is what I actually want to do, and you can do it at a different level because, well, you managed to do it until, well, the last class maybe, and then it stopped. You can continue on with a follow-up education, which is maybe at a different level, as in it's way easier, and you could do something more difficult if it wouldn't be for the exams. Then at some point you might actually flunk again because, well, then we get to internships and all those kind of things. And if you still don't know how to learn and you don't know how to ask and how to see certain things, then society and living in society and working in society is going to be a real challenge. And that's why this was such a victory for me, because I hadn't been able to, well, when it comes to the ministry, so to the government and what they consider proven educations, so according to a certain standard, and I wasn't able to actually, well, I didn't pass the exams because I got stuck at some point. I knew the topic, that wasn't a problem, but telling that to a computer actually was. If I would have talked about it to a living, breathing person, then, we would eventually have, they would have figured out what my reasoning was, and they would have guided me towards the right answer. Not in the sense of they would have told it to me, but they would have understood why I would have been talking in a certain way or reasoning in a certain way. And what is so immensely cool, because I've been studying on. From the moment that I started working, I actually started studying on. And, well, at some point I became a fitness trainer and a medical fitness trainer, and then a masseuse, a sports masseuse, and then I became a therapist, and then I became a coach, and I became a counselor. And all those things were not recognized by the ministry or the government in this case. And that made it kind of hard to go do a postmaster. So when I was talking to administration, they were like, how can you do these masters if you don't have the right diplomas? And I was like, oh, here we go again. But then I talked to the teacher and she was like, yeah, we see what you have done and what you're doing. And we really want you to become part of the people who are becoming experts by lived experience. So for me, it was a huge victory. And I know I'm not the only one who actually gets in nowadays based on what we've done. There are more people like me who are, in this case, neurodivergent, so wired differently when it comes to the brain. You need to bypass the traditional system in order to pick up where they can actually thrive and do other things and learn about other things and in the end support other ones. And that's when it comes to understanding and communicating and really thinking about who am I talking to is so important. And especially when we talk about what can one process and what not, and for how long can we process certain things. And for me, again, it has to do with all the sounds in the environment. If there are too many background noises, I get distracted easily and I will say so, like, I can't do this now because there's too much noise in the background. But when you encounter people and you see they are overwhelmed or they're trying to explain something to you, don't dismiss them, but really try to understand what is it that they are saying to you, what they want to get across. And you might be surprised. So the next time you go to social media and you're hooked up to those AI videos because they make you feel great on the spot, because, well, there's a lot of emotional language involved, then think about it. Is that what you want to see, or do you want to have an actual conversation with an actual person and really get to know one another a little bit better? Well, if you want to think about what I said, I'm going to write a blog post about this, and you can find it on ladylexi.com if you look in the menu for blog posts. And of course, if you are someone like, well, I heard what you said, and yes, I could use some support as well, reach out to me. Let me know what you would like to do, what it is you need. And also remember that I do have the Rewrite Your Inner Story challenge, which is meant for if you have doubts or you think negatively about yourself and you would like to change that inner narrative to a positive one, because we all deserve to speak up and to be heard, seen, and understood. Well, if you know someone who needs to hear this, make sure to share the video. And if you leave a comment about something that was something like, oh, this is something that I needed to hear, or maybe you have a certain question for a follow-up topic, then let me know so I can talk about that the next time around.